Hi, Alan. How are you?
I'm fantastic. It's nice to connect with you.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Thanks for. I was just saying there beforehand, but thanks for jumping on. I really appreciate it. When I saw your sort of page on LinkedIn when I first came across you, I was like, "Oh, I'd love to get Alan on. I'd love to have you on the podcast. So many things I'm looking forward to chatting to you about." But yeah, appreciate it, mate. Thanks very much.
No, absolutely my pleasure. I look forward to having a fun conversation, and will do my best to add as much value to you and your listeners as I can.
Thanks, mate. We've I've just stopped us there and jumped us straight on to recording because we're jumping two sort of performance coach orientated people. We're jumping straight into our love of performance and sports, and we're just talking about boxing, and I'm talking about your Hall of Fame behind you, including just behind your head. I could just about see your book behind there. Raise your game. There you go. Just behind it. For those people just listening in audio, basketball's been is the game you've been involved in mostly, Alan, isn't it?
It sure has. Basketball was my first identifiable passion. I fell in love with the game at 4 or 5 years old, and here 40 years later, basketball is still a major pillar in my life. So that was always my first love, and that was what I pursued professionally as a basketball performance coach. But even as a basketball performance coach, I always had such a strong appreciation for all of the other sports, individual sports and team sports, combative sports and not, and always would try to learn from some of the other sports and adopt some mentalities and principles and strategies from those sports and their training that I could always apply to basketball. I mean, I wanted to make my training very basketball specific, but you better believe that I studied, performance coaches from other sports and tried to draw on that so that I could be hopefully as innovative and as comprehensive as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, really. One of my sons plays rugby. I often talk about him on the podcast, but he's rugby mad. But I don't know quite where it's come from, really, but he's innovating in himself, he's mad on the NFL. He watches it all the time, NFL, more than rugby. And so his footwork drills, and he sees these guys. And we were talking about just the other day, my sort of personal take is often in the States, it seems a little bit ahead sometimes in forward thinking, in approaching different sports and so on. So you see in rugby over here, particularly down at the clubs, it's very old school. It's very old school training that they do. But he's got like ladders and he's doing foot drills and it's explosion and he's looking at these different ways of moving and we're trying to sort of incorporate everything into moving. You talk about sort of fighting arts. We had Conor McGregor over here, was one of the UFC fighters, and I was, people trying to get into movement and things like that, but learn from so many different sports and new ways of thinking. It just blows my mind. It's fascinating.
Oh, it sure is. And I think as coaches or leaders in any field, we should always stay very open-minded to learning from every situation that we can. And I'm a big believer that you should never just stay in your one narrow niche, that even if you only train athletes of one sport, you should still expand out to find other methods and other modalities and way to train. Even now, most of my work now is as a keynote speaker, and I don't just study other speakers. I actually watch a lot of stand-up comedy, and I watch a lot of musicians, especially hip-hop artists, and because both of those are just other forms of spoken word. And I think that the best stand-up comedians and the best hip-hop artists have learned how to change their tonality and their inflection, and they change their physicality and the way that they use words and paint imagery. So I'm always trying to learn from other art forms of spoken word to make myself better as a keynote speaker. And I did the same thing when I was a basketball performance coach. I would study people that trained boxers, that trained football players, that trained soccer, that trained rugby, that trained baseball. And I would just try to pull one or two things from them, whether it was an exercise or a principle or even a coaching technique, and try to apply that to my players.
Wow. So what difference is it actually? You've jumped from the world of basketball. What difference has it made to your keynote speaking? I've watched obviously some of your on your website keynote speeches. what have you? Where have you transformed in that? Are you more animated, more energetic, or where's it gone?
You know what I've had to do is I've had to add some more tools to my speaking toolbox. So when I would spend most of my time in a gym working with basketball players, as you can probably appreciate, there'd be times where I'm in a big cavernous gym and I've got 200 kids that I need to run through a workout or a clinic. So when I was younger, really I did everything through brute force. Everything was done at a very loud pace. I was I had to be very vocal, and screaming was the best way that I knew how to get people's attention. Whereas today, not so much. I'm not going to walk into a conference or stand on stage or go into a boardroom and start screaming at people. It's simply not appropriate. So I've had to find other tools to get people's attention or to draw them in. Most of what I was doing in the basketball space was much more directive in telling players where they needed to go and what they needed to do. Yeah. And now I lean much more heavily on storytelling and being able to tell a story and teach a lesson and then give them something practical that they can walk away with. If I'm on stage somewhere, even if it's virtual, I have a microphone. So I don't really need to amplify my voice. So I don't really need to raise my voice very much. There's other ways that I can make a point. And I've learned that through keynote speaking, two ways that you can really emphasize a point. One of them simply has to do with your pace. Yep. And the ability to pause. And then another, which is kind of interesting, is the exact opposite of being really loud at a high volume, is you can say something much softer and you actually get the audience to lean in a little bit.
I think I just leaned in. I just leaned in as you said it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so to me, I'd like to believe that I've really widened my toolbox, if you will, and have a variety of tools that I can use now to hopefully make an impact on any audience.
Yeah, it's interesting creating that awareness around these things, isn't it? I mean, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. The reason I've just pulled on that thread a little bit is because for me, keynote speaking has become something that's been building, and it's another skill to build alongside the performance coaching, the performance psychology side. And so, but like you said, you can learn from different areas of life and draw them in, can't you, into different practices. What was it, Alan, that took you? It sounds like quite a significant sidestep from basketball. Are you not involved in basketball at all now then?
Yeah, not from a training standpoint. So I don't do any more performance training on the court, but now I like to say I do performance training off the court. So I'll still work with athletes and coaches on improving leadership, on improving communication and culture, on helping teams become more collaborative and improving their cohesion. So I'll still work with athletes and coaches. It's just I'm not teaching them how to run faster or move better or become stronger. Now it's all off the court stuff, which is the same stuff that I teach to any business or corporate organization. Is how can you all become more effective communicators? How can you learn to hold each other accountable to higher standards? And those types of things. So what's funny is I still consider myself a performance coach. I'm just now more of a performance coach in business than a performance coach in basketball.
Yeah. And obviously those things, the correlation between, I mean, from my background in the military, it's a little bit like the other way around slightly for me. I was much more involved in leadership, in team performance, and I still wear that hat. And it is, like you said, about communication, about getting clarity and alignment and cohesion amongst teams of high performance and trust in teams. And that sort of thing resonates from my SBS background, I suppose your equivalent Navy SEAL guys there. And so that was drawn upon, but my real love as well was also digging into what drives people on an individual level from the psychology perspective. And I suppose one of the things that I thought about in talking to you today was a little bit, two things really. I suppose one, some of the principles and practices that you actually employ, and obviously we're talking about those already, but also what you've seen other people employ. And I have to say, I'm going straight to some of the stars that you've worked with and the story of Kobe Bryant. And I wondered if we could sort of kick off really with the story that you tell, which I think is amazing. And I was telling it my son about when you got invited out to the Nike training camp, and you went to see him in the morning, early in the morning.
I sure did. What I'll do is kind of give your listeners like a Cliff Notes version of that, and then I can make sure that I provide you with a link to the video that would do a much better job than I do at the moment. But you just teed it up brilliantly. You know, the late great Kobe Bryant. I had a chance to watch him do one of his private workouts really early in the morning, and at this time, I mean, Kobe was clearly the best player in the world. And I remember watching his workout and being very surprised at how basic the drills were that he was doing. He was doing some very basic footwork drills, very basic offensive moves. He was working on pivoting. And I was really surprised. As a young coach, I expected the best player in the world to be doing some really flashy and sexy drills. And instead, he was focusing on the basics. And when I asked him later that day at camp, Kobe, you're the best player in the world. Why are you doing such basic drills? And he smiled and he winked, but he said with all seriousness, why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Because I never get bored with the basics. And that line, I mean, it still makes the hairs on my neck stand up. And it's one of the most powerful lessons that I've ever learned, and really is the foundation to everything I teach these days. Is you can't get bored with the basics, and you have to always focus on the fundamentals. And in basketball, the basics are your footwork. They're your shooting mechanics. They're how well you handle the ball. But if someone is listening to this in any other area of life, whether they play a different sport or they're actually in business, you need to figure out what are your basics. And then you need to work on those things, religiously during the unseen hours to improve them. And you can't ever leave the basics. That's one of the biggest mistakes that all of us make at some point. Even though this is something I believe in and something I teach, if there's ever a time where I don't believe I'm performing as well as I'm capable of in any area of my life, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in speaking, whatever it may be, if I take a beat and I kind of unpack it, it's usually because I've started to get away from the basics. And that's just a reminder to get back to them. I mean, ideally, we'll never leave the basics in the first place. But because we're human beings and we make mistakes and we're fallible, that's often the case. And, it happens all of the time. I hear, especially here with American football, excuse me, a team will lose a few games in a row and the coach will come on to do the press conference and they'll say, we've really been playing poorly these last couple games. On Monday at practice, we're going to get back to the basics. And in American football, that's blocking and tackling and throwing and catching. And I always find that kind of funny because if the answer to the problem is to get back to the basics, then you should never leave the basics in the first place, and maybe you won't have those problems. So never getting bored with the basics and always learning to focus on, respect, and appreciate the fundamentals is a lesson that has high utility and can be applied to any area of life.
What an experience seeing Kobe Bryant do that, and that was about 4 a.m, wasn't it? I like the first part of the story as well when you said it was like 4 a.m. You got a taxi to get there early and I'm telling your story now, but 3:30 a.m. or something, and he was already in a full sweat because he was prepared at that time.
He had already beaten me. You're not kidding. And I love that you brought up your military background, because I think generally speaking, the military does one of the best jobs of always sticking to the basics.
Absolutely.
I did not serve, but I have several friends who have in a variety of different branches, whether it's the Army, it's the Navy, Air Force, what have you. And all of them talk about how much they would stick to the basic components all of the time. And I think that, there's no better team in the world than the military, regardless of what country you're from.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, grappling. I still train in that. And I'm thinking of a guy I know called Victor Estima, who was a world champion. And I remember talking to Victor, and he basically was saying that when he got his black belt, that's when he really started to learn the fighting art. And it was basically getting back to those basics, as you said. But what it was really about was a clarity of purpose and being able to in any given moment, he could go straight to the technique. So it was almost like a shedding of the mastery is often a shredding of the paraphernalia and the things that take us away from being present in that moment, isn't it? So amazing stuff. And seeing Kobe Bryant, I mean, some of these other names that Kevin Durant, is it?
Yeah, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. I mean, I've had an opportunity to be around some really good players, and that is one of the things that they all share was a respect and appreciation for the basics. And just to be clear, this doesn't mean that you only do the basics.
Yes.
I mean, these players would still graduate to more advanced moves, and they would still do, more advanced techniques, but they never left the basics because the basics were the foundation to which everything is built. So I'm not saying that, even from a physical fitness standpoint, I'm a big believer that if you just did, push-ups and lunges and pull-ups and dips, you can be incredibly fit.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that you only need to do those things. You can certainly move on to trying some different things. But at the end of the day, if you can't do push-ups or pull-ups or lunges or dips, then you're most likely not going to be able to matriculate up to something higher. So we don't want to lose or leave the basics. Let those be the foundation. And this is where kind of the compound effect is really helpful. If a guy like Kobe Bryant, he only needs to work on the basics for 15, 20, 30 minutes a day, over time,
yes,
that will build up. So I'm not telling someone that you need to go work on the most basic fundamentals for 6 hours a day. No, just do a little bit every single day, and that's what will add up.
And that's the same as we were talking just before we recorded there. I'm working with boxing trainer Angel Fernandez, as I was saying, who's worked with Anthony Joshua and some of the guys there. I'm not at Anthony Joshua's gym, but the guys are elite level fighters. And this was always my training. It's going back to those fundamentals. It doesn't mean that you don't start the complexities there. Yeah, I get it 100%. And just fascinating that these guys at elite levels are really practicing that. And again, for us, SBS, that it is always grounding yourself in those things, being able to come back to those. I've got a quote actually here. I was going to, before I come on to that, I was going to say, some years ago, Alan, I was working in private security. And we'd got a job basically to take some NBA players down to the Soccer World Cup in South Africa. And so it ended up being a guy, Richard Jefferson, who was one of the guys, and Luke Walton. And it was great. Obviously, I was doing security. I'm all of 5'8", and these guys turn up 6'8", and I'm like the security guy or one of them. But just such a crack. We had such a laugh with great guys. Luke Walton, as I saw, went on to become head coach of the LA Lakers as well.
Yep.
So
he's now the coach of the Sacramento Kings, and it really does a great job. And Richard Jefferson's a commentator on ESPN and does a remarkable job as well. So you met two really good guys.
Yeah. Fascinating as well for me. And I've not, we're obviously going to I was going to mention The Last Dance with Michael Jordan because we're on the basketball theme. But I remember being in the States some years ago, and I didn't really, it's not really over here, so I didn't really watch basketball that much. And I started watching this game, and Jordan was playing, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe that difference in his performance. And obviously people are seeing that now in The Last Dance. But it was just incredible to me. And I think of basketball, I'm thinking of Phil Jackson, who was the coach for the Chicago Bulls there, the Zen master. And I'm a proponent of meditation. I got taught meditation 10 years ago by a fella called Bob Roth over there from the States.
Of course.
Do you know? But I don't know if you know Bob. Do you?
I don't know him. I'm very familiar with his work, and that's phenomenal. I started getting into meditation about 4 years ago, and you're right. I mean, it's a total game changer.
Yeah, I mean, as a long-term training, and also a concentrated training to be able to, because when you say train the mind, what do you actually do? And that's one of the things. And I see that as a very formal way of practicing and training. I was taught by Bob fortunately, about 10 years ago now. So, and he's head of the David Lynch Foundation. I've actually had him on the podcast as well. So,
Nice.
so he came on and talked. But as a longer term development piece, definitely meditation. Phil Jackson had quite sort of famously had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and meditating. And I sometimes see basketball, my interpretation of basketball, that it seems to be forward thinking. It seems to be people looking for that edge, and they really get it. I don't know what your perspective is.
Oh, most certainly. It's kind of neat anytime you see an innovative coach implement something that at the time is very abnormal and is very different. And I'm sure most of the NBA was kind of looking at him with a crooked eye saying, meditation, why would you have basketball players meditate? And of course, that's, 20, 25 years ago. And now fast forward today, I'm pretty willing to bet that every NBA team has some sort of meditative practice integrated into what they do. I actually follow the Headspace app, and I know Headspace is the official meditation app of the NBA. Like they
Really?
actually do stuff,
Wow.
with the NBA, and it's pretty remarkable. And the same could be said on a lot of different fronts. I mean, I'm 45 years old, and when I graduated from university in the late 90s, at that time, less than 1/3 of NBA teams even had a strength and conditioning consultant. And usually that consultant was a bodybuilder from the closest Gold's Gym to their arena. Like when I graduated college, basketball performance training was hardly even an industry. And if you fast forward to today in 2021, not only does every NBA team have a strength and conditioning coach, they have an entire performance department. I mean, they have an entire department that has chefs and nutritionists and people that specialize in meditation and Pilates and yoga, athletic trainers, physical therapists, massage therapists, speed and agility coaches, strength coaches, doctors. They have an entire department. So it's really neat to see how far that's come. And yeah, guys like Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan were so ahead of the curve. They were doing things that we all do now and believe are standard. They were doing them before anyone else. And one of the other things that I always find kind of comical is how many people think meditation is something new. I mean, meditation has been around for thousands of years, just like yoga. When the yoga craze hit the United States 20 years ago, and everyone's like, wow, what is this new form of exercise? And you're like, no, yoga's been around for thousands of years, but now people are just starting to pay attention to it. So I think it's really cool. Meditation has been a huge help in my life in a variety of components. And I know that it would have helped me as a player had I adopted it back then.
Yeah, I actually put something out on social media the other day about ancient wisdom. And I said it's something about, it's ancient and it's wisdom for a reason, and it's been there, hasn't it? So, yeah, I mean, and people struggle with, I mean, I don't make this all meditation, but people struggle with meditation. I think, but what I want to expand that meditation is to say that in meditation, I think a lot of people give it a shot and then kind of think, poor bugger that, because it's too hard, or it's difficult, and they're sat there sweating, trying to come back to the breath or whatever the point of focus is. And I think often it's this natural inclination to mentally tense or force and try and set an expectation or an outcome focus.
Yes.
Now, the reason that I'm saying that is because for me, the analogy of meditation, or I call it like the microcosm of meditation, which is a dedicated formal practice. But for me, that then translates into sports, into business, into life. And so often, the natural inclination of people, particularly when faced with stress, and again, stress can be, as we well know, sporting stress or business stress or relationship stress, or whatever that stress is ultimately stress. And often we want to push away against that stress in the same way, or try and get ourselves, and we grip on harder mentally and create more physical tension. And so that, I don't know whether you resonate with that, but this is the way that I view meditation, and that's why I see it so important for the wider aspect of life.
Yeah, I agree with every word that you just said, especially the part that people find challenging is they have a rigid expectation. They have an attachment to an outcome. They want an immediate return on their investment. So it's like, hey, I've been meditating for 2 days. How come things aren't better? It's like, no. You have to have a little bit more patience. And it's. I think people also view meditation as trying to control your thoughts when it's really just more about just being aware of your thoughts. That there shouldn't be any attachment to that. And I do think, I mean, like anything, meditation takes a tremendous amount of practice just to be able to get into a state where you can be fully aware and you can just be present, or you can connect to your breath. And I do believe that difficulty is another reason why a lot of people don't do it. I mean, when you get to the point that you're able to meditate, meditating should not be hard. But when we live in a world where there's always some type of stimulation, you know, we're either watching a TV or we're listening to a podcast or we're scrolling through our phone. We've created this urgency and immediacy that we always need something to stimulate us. And when you have someone just sit alone with their thoughts in the quiet and connect to their breath, that makes people really, really uncomfortable. And I know that from my own personal experience. When I first started meditating, it was really challenging to me, and at times often frustrating. And keep in mind, I mean, I wasn't even really doing a traditional meditation practice. I was following a 10-minute guided meditation using the Headspace app. I mean, I had someone telling me what to do, and I still found it difficult. Whereas now, I do believe that I've made some of that progress. And I think that other part is, it's kind of same thing with exercise. You know, we've all had friends that, you know, they've worked out for 2 weeks and they want to know why they're not in great shape yet. It's like, well, it takes more of an investment than 2 weeks. And it's the same thing with meditating. If you want to be fully aware and fully present, that's not something you can do in a couple of sessions. In fact, it most likely would probably take years of daily meditation before you could come anywhere close to that.
100%, mate. And also seeing that, I suppose that outcome, this seems to be coming up a lot actually, but outcome versus process. And, you know, and sometimes for me it's like, I aim for two, I was trained with 2 meditations, 20 minutes a day. So, and at first people think, oh God, 20 minutes seems like forever. But once you actually train and allow, then 20 minutes can sort of fly by. But the whole point is sometimes, you know, if I had a really busy sort of stressful, you know, what you'd term a stressful day, and it's kind of 9:30 at night, sometimes it's about the momentum of keeping that process. Yeah. So I'll sort of take myself off and just go and say to myself, well, I'm just going to do 5 minutes. But it's more important that I keep the process going and keeping that going daily practice. Rather than sort of achieving some state. And I think Bob always says to us, you know, when we try and achieve a state, no expectation. We're not arriving with any expectation. And I think what you're saying there, I see people running down the street, and it's like, you know, they set the stopwatch, and it's like they've almost got to set that expectation, and they've got to almost kill themselves, but it creates tension. And you watch Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan in full flow. There's no tension. They're just letting the game come to them, and everything slows down, which again is kind of on par with meditation. And the other thing, you know, going back to expectation, is someone may be listening to this show and saying, I'm going to try meditating because Richard says it's great, and they try to sit down for 20 minutes for their first session, and it feels like an eternity. But they don't have to start at 20 minutes. No. See if you can meditate for 60 seconds or for 3 minutes and slowly work your way up. You know, that's no different than saying, you know, I've never been a runner, but tomorrow morning I'm going to run a marathon. No, that's probably a little bit too much, and you'll most likely find yourself frustrated. So just take your time in doing it. And, you know, all of these things, as you said so perfectly, it is a process, and it's about building the system and creating the habits to be able to do that. I meditate for 10 minutes every morning. I still use the Headspace app. And even after doing it for 4 years, there are some mornings
where I'm better at meditating than others. There's some mornings where I'm able to be fully present. I feel connected. I just let myself be. And then there's other times where my mind is racing like a squirrel. And that 10 minutes, I'm probably hardly present for any of it. But I've learned to give myself some grace and some compassion. And I don't look at that as a waste. It might not have been my best meditation practice ever, but I still strengthened that habit. I still strengthened the process of doing it. And it just wasn't my best day. But I know that I've got another shot at it the next time I try to meditate. So a lot of this also has to do with not only letting go of expectations and letting go of a desired result, but giving yourself some grace and compassion and saying, it's okay. It's okay to try meditation and not be great at it your first couple of times. It's okay to start working out and within the first 4 minutes, you're bent over, breathing heavy because you're exhausted. It's okay. This is all a process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly at these times, a bit crazy times at both sides of the water, that again, I see people that it's almost like everyone's been taught to sort of to force more in terms of business and the high-paced life and so on. And I've said to a few people, when we first went into lockdown, going back March, I think last year, what counterintuitively, what a lot of people said to me was it was the most clear they'd thought at all. It was the most effective they've been, the most work that they got done. And I often think of people term the sort of 80% rule, and often really coming back from that maximum effort of trying to really come back from that a little bit in terms of the physiology and the psychology, so that we actually get some ease, and that allows us more into a type of flow state. I just literally scribbled this down before we came on because I remembered it from the Last Dance, and it was Mark Vancy, I think, is the author of Rare Air. I don't know if you've and he was quoting Michael Jordan, and he said, most people struggle to be present. Most people sit doing yoga trying to be present, meditate trying to get here and now. Most people live in fear because we project the past into the future. Michael is a mystic, obviously Michael Jordan. Michael is a mystic. He was never anywhere else. His gift was not that he could jump high, run fast, or shoot a basketball. His gift was that he was completely present, and that was the separator. So I'm butchering that last bit, but his gift was he was completely present, and that was the separator. And I talk about high performance happening in the present moment, and being able to focus, and that's a huge skill. And obviously, can you talk to where you've seen some of the guys that you've worked with in terms of their ability to focus and to perform at those elite levels?
Yeah, that is the big separator. I mean, there are plenty of really, really good athletes in the NBA. So if a lot of guys are big, strong, fast, and can jump high, then the major separator is the mindset. And a big portion of that mindset is the ability to stay present. I'll even speak in the first person. I know that's still something that's a challenge to me often, is being in the present moment. I'd like to believe that I'm better at it today than I was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that it's starting to feel more natural, and that it's easier to be in the present moment, and I do so more consistently. But there's still plenty of times where I get distracted by the past, something that happened 5 minutes ago or yesterday. And there are still times where, I'm thinking a little bit too far forward, and maybe even get a little bit of anxiety because of the uncertainty going on in the world. But where I'm very thankful to be now at where I am at present is I recognize when I'm going backwards or I'm looking forward, and I can get myself back to present much quicker than I ever have before. And the key is being in that present moment. That's the only place where your highest performance can actually exist. Now, if you're incredibly talented, you can still perform at a high level and not be fully present, but you can't perform at the level you're capable of and not be fully present. So there are some people that can get away with it. I mean, there are some players in the NBA who probably eat an awful diet and they can still score 40 points on any given night. But but they're being successful in spite of those habits, not because of them. And
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
so important. And same thing for regular folks like us. The more we can be in the present moment, then the more likely we'll perform at our best. And I've also found that we're happiest and most fulfilled when we're just in the present moment. Distractions and anxieties tend to melt away when you only focus on the here and now. And it's a skill that, I'll continue to work on for the rest of my life. And certainly not anything that I've mastered yet, but I love being better at it than I've ever been before.
Yeah, we're not quite at the Dalai Lama stage, are we? Or the.
No.
I mean, Michael Jordan. Again, continuing the basketball theme, there's a lot of people I know that have read the Tim Grover book, Relentless.
Yep.
Have you read? I don't know if you've read it, Alan.
I sure have.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, that Tim Grover was basically a physical trainer, but then became like the mental trainer, really, I think, didn't he? And he got, again, a good story. He got sort of 3 weeks. Michael Jordan gave him 3 weeks, and he was with him 15 years later. And I'm trying to remember. He terms them as coolers, closers and cleaners.
Coolers and I forgot what the other one is.
Yeah, I think he's the only guy that probably remembers them. But coolers, closers, and cleaners. And cleaners, and cleaners being the Michael Jordans of the world. I think one of the really interesting things for me is the dark side, as he terms it. And obviously that was something that really, I suppose, bubbled up a little bit in seeing Michael Jordan. I think Michael Jordan came across very well, but he was utterly relentless in winning. He didn't suffer any fools, and obviously in training, if people weren't coming up to the standard, he was, what are you going to do in an NBA game? And I think probably back to my world, really, I suppose, really that was, ultimately, if you're in combat, you can't not perform, if you like, or come up to the mark. So that dark side is really of interest to me, because in the past in my life, I've suffered with, I think, from conditioning, anxiety and worry and negativity. Despite being able to sort of like do the special forces and things like, such as those. But I think it affects so many people, anxiety. But sometimes tapping into that darker side can really, it can be powerful. I just wonder what you thought on it. Have you thought about the darker side from Tim Grover's book? And have you seen it and used it yourself?
I think one of the things that makes that unique is, I do believe Michael Jordan is kind of an outlier. I don't believe there's been anyone else that's been like him. I think a Kobe Bryant's probably come pretty close to that. And I do think there's some other athletes, Tiger Woods, for example, Tom Brady, with American football here, that have some things vaguely similar. But Michael Jordan was about as unique as we've ever seen. I know personally, I have a lot of respect for Tim Grover, and I've actually met him several times, and I love the book Relentless and the way that he shared those things. I view it slightly different, at least from my own vantage point. I don't necessarily look at it as a dark side. I look at it as the good, the bad, and the ugly of me makes me who I am. And I have to be willing to accept and embrace all of that. Yes. And, I understand that there are, there'll be emotions, for example. I certainly can get angry and get frustrated and get disappointed and get jealous. Like, those are normal human emotions. And I guess if you want to call those kind of the dark side or the dark emotions. But what I work really hard at is allowing myself to feel those, giving myself permission to feel them, but I don't allow them to dictate my behavior. And I don't allow them to dictate how I treat others. And this is a lesson I talk to my kids all the time about. I tell my own children, who are very young now, it's okay for you to be angry. It's not okay for you to treat someone poorly because you're angry. You can be mad all you want, but you're not going to lash out at your brother or sister because you're mad, and being able to have that type of control. What I think makes Jordan so unique was I think he really tried to channel some of those emotions, and he used them as fuel. They highlighted in The Last Dance.
Yep.
He would look for any reason he could to get pissed off at his opponent. I mean,
it's amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was making up stories just to find a way to get mad enough to play. And I don't personally operate that way, but I think that's what makes Michael Jordan so unique. And it certainly worked well for him. But I don't think it's an operating system that everybody has to go by. When my goal is to go out and deliver the best keynote that I can deliver, I'm not trying to get pissed off. I'm not looking for any extra motivation. I'm not looking for a dark side. I want to be fully prepared,
Yep.
and I want to go out there and give the best that I'm capable of in service of the audience. So I think with any of these books that we read or philosophies we hear, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think everybody's got to figure out what works well for them and figure out how to channel what you need to perform at your highest level. But as a fan, I was so fascinated with that concept of the dark side and the way that Jordan utilized it.
And he did get people. He gets slighted by somebody, wouldn't he? And everyone would be like, "Ooh, you shouldn't have pissed him off like that." And then, he'd go and smash a load of points.
Yes.
I this is one of the words of that's been coming up a lot with some people I'm working with about aggression. And again, it's like I totally agree. Different fields of play in different areas of our life. There's different parts of ourselves that we bring to those, whether it be our business, our performance, whether it be a home life as a dad, or whatever it may be. But I think that sort of word aggression, and using those areas of fuel, particularly for me, it's around if there's negativity that becomes a problem in terms of keynote speaking, for instance. What do we need to do to be in that space? And I'm like you. I think of high positive energy is one way I sort of term those sort of things, and often the ability to have fun, which is underrated, but that high positive energy that comes from really enjoying what it is that we do and engage in that, and that can really negate some of the more negative things. What are you saying to yourself before you go on stage, Alan, out of interest? What's going through the mind?
Well, I remind myself, kind of an affirmation, if you will, like, hey, Alan, you have prepared for this. You've done the work. You are ready. And I can only say that if I have prepared and I have done the work. This is not about blowing smoke. This is saying, hey, you've done everything you could to prepare this message or this lesson. You've done your due diligence. You know all about the audience. You've rehearsed incessantly. You're ready for this. And then the other thing I say is go out there and have fun, because I know that if I have fun, that'll increase the chance that the audience has fun. And then just the last thing I say basically is it's not about me, it's about them. Like, I'm not up there for me. I'm up there to be of service to other people. And I do believe that the message I have to share will be of service to them. So I have some confidence in that. And I still get, what they call the butterflies a little bit before a talk. But that means I care. Like, I'm thankful for an opportunity to be in front of people. And I want to do the best that I'm capable of for them. I'm not doing it for myself. I'm not doing it for any accolades or awards. I want to do the best I can for them. And, to me, the best praise I can receive at the end of a keynote, there's a few things. One, if someone says, it looked like you were having fun up there. You look like you're really enjoying what you do. That's a compliment that I really and truly appreciate. When they say something to the effect of, boy, you really gave us some practical, actionable stuff. Like, yes, you inspired us and motivated us, but I really appreciated that thing you gave us, and I'm going to do it tomorrow morning. That makes me feel like I added value to them. And my favorite thing is when they say something along the lines of, boy, you really did your homework, because I thought you were talking just to me. Or I know you don't work for our company, but I can tell that you did enough due diligence to see the world the way that we see it. I feel like you've been a coworker of mine for 10 years, not a paid outside speaker. So anytime I can get that type of praise afterwards, it makes me feel good to know that I hit the mark. Because in speaking, it's all about the audience. In coaching, it's all about your athletes or your team. And to me, those values are very, very important.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, just delving into your book. Raise Your Game. The book. Congratulations on the book as well. And I have to admit, I need to read your book yet. So
okay.
I want to get into it. But some of those principles and practices and the key messages, your insights and some of the learning that you've drawn upon from these worlds that we've been talking about of basketball, of high performance, of leadership and of teams. What are some of the, I suppose I'm like delving in here, but what are some of the key themes of some of the speeches?
Well, the number one key theme we covered earlier with the Kobe story, which is never get bored with the basics. And another really important theme, and this is a lesson that I believe applies to any athlete, to any coach, or anyone in business. You earn your confidence through demonstrated performance during the unseen hours. So if you want to get good at your craft, then you have to put in the time to earn the right to be confident. You have to get in repetition.
You have to do the work.
You have to do the work.
Yeah.
That's where you'll derive your confidence. But you have to blend your confidence with humility, that you have to be willing to acknowledge that no matter how good you've become, you can still get better. No matter how good you've become, there are still other people out there who can help you improve. So when you take confidence and you blend it with humility, then you become coachable. And if I could give you a handful of words that I hope would describe me, I hope coachable is one of them. And that's not something for me to determine. You'd have to ask the people that work with me whether or not they think I'm coachable. But to me, being coachable is really, really important because it means you're open to learning new things. Yes. You're still open to improvement and to development. You know, and it's easy to be coachable, or easier to be coachable, when you're new at something. I mean, if I came over to hang out with you and I was going to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu for the first time, it's pretty easy for me to be coachable because I don't know anything.
Yes.
But after I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for 30 years and I'm a 5th degree black belt and I'm really good, am I still coachable then? Am I still willing to admit that even though I've gotten to this level, I can still get better? And am I open to you still giving me some pointers on how I can improve? That's what I've noticed from the guys like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. Those guys are at the top of their game, but they're still coachable and they're still open to learning and getting better.
And it's that insatiable appetite. I'm thinking of somebody that I've coached, and he'll know who he is because he listens to the podcast. And he didn't want to be coached. He didn't like the word coaching. And it's this block that people have. I mean, I suppose there was a guy, Shenryu Suzuki, talked about beginner's mind and being able to turn up with that beginner's mind. And again, in anything that we do. So if we come to the practice of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or meditation or work or whatever, we know everything or we know a lot, then really you start to realise that you know very little, and that's where you start to see to be coachable. Yeah, I mean, what do you see as this is like a sort of, I'm almost going to use the word frustration, but when I talk to people about the mental game, I see people really acting in dysfunctional ways in so many areas of their life, and so I think we're so often looking for the easy answer, the easy way out, and taking those paths of least resistance that then just compounds into these sort of problems, and then sort of talking to people about, and this can be athletes as well, the mental game. A lot of athletes make the mistake of not really seeing, I think, that what we say to ourselves matters. What we're, the thinking and emotions affect performance, and really closes off to the skills and the practices that we do when under pressure, particularly. And so the more I've gone down the road over the years of psychology is to see people that are struggling. And we see that being portrayed in all sorts of areas of life, and with the COVID virus, political things going on. what do you think is I was going to say, put it two ways. What do you think is the biggest barrier to people really creating awareness and seeing things with some clarity? And what can they do to really start breaking that down?
Well, part of it, I think, has to do with I don't know that everyone has a working definition of mental toughness. I think some people think it's something different than it actually is, especially in the sport world. I think there's a lot of players and a lot of coaches who believe mental toughness is your ability to tolerate physical discomfort. Is to be able to do certain exercises until you're dizzy or you're throwing up, or lifting weights until that's not how I view mental toughness. In fact, I actually think mental toughness is kind of a summary of everything you and I have talked about so far. I think the number one factor in being mentally tough is your ability to be present. I think being present in the moment, especially when things are chaotic and there's a lot of distractions. You're in the heat of a game and there's so many things going on. For you to just be in the flow and to be fully present, you have to be really mentally tough to be present. I also believe mental toughness has a lot to do with emotional intelligence and your ability to understand, recognize, and manage your own emotions. I had a performance coach tell me one time, a mental performance coach, that our emotions are designed to inform us. They're not designed to direct us. So
Yes.
If you're in the middle of a game or you're getting ready to shoot some free throws to win the game, and you feel some emotions like, I'm a little anxious, I'm a little worried, what if I miss? Being in the present moment, being able to block those things out, be able to connect to your breath, empty your mind, and step up and do something that you've done hundreds of thousands of times in practice takes a tremendous amount of mental toughness. So it's the ability to regulate these different emotions. And that's what I think part of the issue is. When we see an athlete, we think just by their physical stature, wow, that's a big, strong, tough guy.
Yeah.
When in reality, toughness doesn't have anything to do with that. Toughness has to do with your ability to stay present. And I think we've certainly been able to shine the light on and expose a lot of people, especially during this pandemic, because this pandemic has been really challenging for a lot of people. And I've firsthand seen some people with some really tremendous mental toughness. No matter what's been going on with COVID-19, they've been able to stay present. They've been able to regulate their emotions. And that's not easy to do, but that's how I define mental toughness. And you can find mental toughness in anyone or anything. It's not just relegated to big, strong athletes. Mental toughness can be found in anyone.
Yeah, you've summed that up great, Alan. I think you've hit the nail on the head for me. I think of mental toughness as well, a learned capacity to regulate emotions under pressure and stress, to get a unique emotional response. And the emotions are important. Emotions really being the sort of current which allows us to access those skills. And so I sometimes say to people is, often people, I think we started saying this before, but dampen down emotions. But I try to sort of say that emotions are the regulators, are the clocks on the car, if you like, telling us what is really going on. And really is not to be completely imposed upon by them, but to recognize them, to be aware of them, and then to ultimately get to what is actually driving those emotions, is to be able to change something that it's telling us. And so I totally agree. I think there's a thing that sort of says that, particularly guys from special forces backgrounds, or they're all rock solid, mentally tough, and yes, there is obviously a mental toughness in some areas that guys perform. But in other areas, other fields of play, if you like, other people can struggle a little bit sometimes. And so, and people talk about resilience as a word. They throw that, especially in the business world. I seem to think that people talk about resilience a lot. And ultimately for me, like anything, like confidence, you have to do the work. You have to put the time and the effort in to be able to be resilient, to be able to be confident. And that's, again, that's one of those things where I think there's I was thinking this before we came on, actually, because I was thinking about this age that we're in now, particularly in terms of social media. I see guys that, again, ex-special forces guys, athletes, people, coaches, whoever they are, and they're actually putting out these statements, these motivational kind of statements. But it's just not a concept. It's not something that we can just take hold of and go, oh, thanks very much.
Right.
It's something that we've got to actually do something with on that daily basis, I think, as we've been unpicking, really.
Oh, most certainly. Yeah. And that's, to me, what's most important. There's a lot of just phrases and slogans and quotes and cliches that people put out on social media, and they even put on the front of T-shirts. And they might sound good, but they don't really give you anything to make an improvement in your life. And to me, that's what's most important. As we keep talking about this concept of mental toughness, there's two phrases that have really helped me. And then I'll give you something a little more practical. One is just to learn to be where your feet are, which means wherever your feet are, make sure that's where your head and your heart are as well. So at any given moment during the day, you can check in with yourself and say, am I where my feet are? Right now, I am fully focused and fully present on our conversation with the goal of being able to deliver as much value as I can to you and your listeners. I'm not thinking about anything else. I don't have any browsers open on my laptop. My phone is turned off and is over here. Like, I'm giving you my full attention because right now at this moment, this is what's most important to me. In a couple of minutes, when our conversation is over, then I'll shift my focus to what's ever important then, and I'll give that my full attention. And that leads me to the next slogan or acronym, if you will, which is WIN, W-I-N, and that stands for what's important now. At any given moment during the day, ask yourself, what's the most important thing for my attention to be placed on at this moment, and make sure that's what you're focused on. Right now, it's with you and having this conversation. Later this evening, it'll be being fully present with my children while we have dinner together. And I won't be looking at my phone while I'm talking to my kids. I won't be watching the TV while I'm having dinner with my kids. I'll be fully focused and present with them. And that's really, really important. And then the last thing I'll say from an emotional regulation standpoint, when I've identified that I'm feeling a certain way, especially if it's anger, if it's frustration, if it's jealousy, if it's any of those things that I don't feel like serve me very well, I just ask myself a quick question and say, whatever's making me mad right now, is this going to matter in 5 minutes? Is this going to matter in 5 days? Is this going to matter in 5 months from now or 5 years from now? And the answer, as you start to move it further and further away, the answer is usually no. Whatever's bothering you at the moment, it might be a big deal in 5 minutes, but it probably won't be in 5 hours. You won't even remember this happened 5 days from now. Yeah. So don't give all of this power to something that ultimately doesn't matter. I see people all the time here in the United States. They get what's called road rage. Somebody cuts them off in traffic and they're just livid. And it's like, who cares? This person cut you off. Is that really going to matter in a few minutes from now? Are you even going to remember that they cut you off 5 days from now? Most likely not. So don't give that any more power than it needs. Just learn how to move to the next play and go on to the next thing. And when you can do those things fairly regularly, I believe that you are mentally tough.
That's a great summary, Alan, really. I mean, be where your feet are. I've heard, do you know Michael Gervais? Have you heard of Michael?
Of course, absolutely. I love his work.
Yeah, great work, innit? I love the Finding Mastery podcast. Yes. And he mentions that a lot, be where your feet are. And I know that comes from a real sort of sporting analogy, but it's so applicable and applied to actually do that. I mean, fear takes people off, doesn't it, down rabbit warrens, and the stories that we tell ourselves can be so detrimental to our overall well-being. I think, like you say, road rage is that I talk about a window of tolerance in terms of our ability to manage stress. And so being able to do that, and again, this is the compound interest of where the daily practices, as it would be with sleep and nutrition and exercise and all these kind of good things for us, is really applying ourselves consistently allows us to balance that so that we we don't go into a complete rage as someone cuts us up in traffic, or
Absolutely.
And also I suppose reducing some of the negativity that's in the news and social media and things. Very simple things to do, but I just as a sort of last point, and I wanted to sort of highlight this for listeners. Your book, Alan. Can you just talk to us about the process of the book and what the overall thing was in releasing the book, and talk to us about that?
Well, it's funny. The book just celebrated its second birthday, so it's been out for 2 years. Came out in January of 2019, and it's called Raise Your Game: High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best. You can find it on Amazon or wherever you buy books. If you prefer to listen to books, you can get it on Audible or iTunes or even in Google Play.
And I'll link to it, Alan, as well on the show. Yeah.
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you so much. I wrote the book for a few reasons. One, I've been a voracious reader my entire adult life, and I can think of a handful of books that really had a profound impact on me and the way that I saw the world. So I have a very strong appreciation for authors and for books. And, I thought to myself, if I could write something that could have a positive impact on another human being, that would be a pretty cool thing. I also realized that I've been very fortunate to have an opportunity to be with some people and to learn some lessons, like from the pictures you see behind me. And it's my job to pay those lessons forward. I realize not everyone has had an opportunity to work with Kevin Durant or to watch Kobe Bryant work out. So I wanted to take those things, and instead of keeping them secret, I wanted to share them with as many people as I could. And I thought a book was a great way to do that. And then I also wrote the book because it helped me get very organized and crystal clear on my message and what it is that I share from stage. My keynotes are so much better now than they were before the book, because things are so much more organized. My thoughts are much more sequential and progressive. So it was really very helpful for that. And then lastly, from a pure business standpoint, the book has led to so many speaking engagements, because someone reads the book and then says, hey, will you share that message with our team? Will you share that message with my sales professionals? So the book has been good for business as well. So really enjoyed writing it. It was a fun process. I enjoy sharing it now. And I'm actually currently writing a follow-up book called Sustain Your Game: How to Manage Stress, Alleviate Stagnation, and Beat Burnout. So the second book will be more about, once you've reached peak performance, how do you stay there for long periods of time without getting burnt out?
Wow. Any little inklings in where that's going, the new book, then? What?
Yeah, the book, so the manuscripts due May 1st. The book will come out probably the end of 2021, maybe early 2022. So it's not even finished writing yet. Still got some time to put into it. But in the meantime, I hope folks really enjoy Raise Your Game.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, Alan, I've really appreciated your time, and obviously listeners I'm sure will love listening to your stories and thoughts and insights. Social media. Obviously, I came across you on LinkedIn. We've connected on LinkedIn the first time we've spoken today, and it'd be great to speak again and have hopefully follow on podcasts with your work and the book coming out and so on. What about other social media? Obviously, your website and
if folks are interested in anything I have to offer, they can go to alansteinjr.com. And if you go to alansteinjr.com/free, FREE, I've got a whole bunch of free videos and downloads and things that whether you're in sports or business, I hope you find valuable. You're welcome to share any of that stuff as liberally as you'd like with your team. And you can also follow me on any of the major social platforms at Alan Stein Jr., Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, as you mentioned. Yeah. And I try to be very accessible on social. I love using social media, certainly to share, but I also use it to learn and to engage and meet new people. So anyone listening to this, if something struck a chord, if you have a question, even if you want to challenge something that I shared, just come on social media and drop me a line. I would love to continue the discussion.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, man. I don't quite share the 100% love of social media at times. I think I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with social media, if I'm honest.
Yes.
What's next for you, Alan? What's taking place after, not directly after this, but business-wise, A lot of virtual stuff, speaking engagements, webinars.
I was going to say directly after this, I'm going to get my hair cut, but I don't think that's what you meant.
I can do my own. Yeah, I'll do my own.
You look great. Still things are still pretty shut down here in the United States. Still not traveling or doing any in-person events, but I have been doing a lot of virtual events and giving virtual keynotes and workshops and interactive coaching sessions. And I'm really enjoying that. I mean, I love being on a stage in front of real people, but I'm finding my niche now here. And this is one of the things that's so cool about a virtual engagement. Here you are on the other side of the pond, and I feel like you're in my living room with me. So even if there's groups in the UK or groups in Europe that want this message or I can be of value to, we're literally just a Zoom call away or a Skype call away, which is really, really cool. I don't have to get on an 8-hour flight and change 3 time zones and spend 4 days there and charge a whole lot of money and then come back. We can organize something very customized that we can all do from the convenience of our offices and our living rooms, and it can be just as impactful. So anyone listening to this, if you have a team or a business, I'd be honored to be able to serve you and help you. Absolutely.
And maybe on that note, I'm sort of formulating some ideas for a bit of a webinar, actually, which, maybe there's something that we could talk about post after this, really, is, a webinar to delve in a little bit deeper even on some of these subjects. But absolutely, I think it's opened it up, both sides of the pond. People now realize that this can work.
Yes.
Some people still say not ideal, but ultimately it can have the impact, I think. So,
and it can be so much more cost effective.
Yeah, totally.
For the most part, the keynote fee I charge is not just for the message I deliver, but it's for the time that I'm away from my home and away from my children. And if I'm going to come to Europe, that's going to take several days off of my calendar, which means I have to charge a pretty decent fee. But when we're doing things virtually, it can be much more reasonable. So I think virtual, while it might not be perfect and or ideal in some scenarios, it can be very convenient and it can be very cost effective. So yeah, would love to get some more business going on in the UK and in Europe in general.
Absolutely. Alan, thanks again. And like I say, I'll link to all of the show notes. I'll leave you to go and get your hair cut.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
But just thanks for jumping on straight away when we got in touch. I really appreciate it. And take care of yourself over there.
I appreciate you. You have a great day. Thanks.
Take care, mate.